I use it with my business, and I use it with my business English students. You can use these with any online article or text, including any online educational resource. There are a lot of texts that are coming out now that are available free online, but don't have necessarily any ESL related exercises to go with them. So that's what we're going to talk about. First, most important one is using Diigo, and I'm going to show you some examples of how I use Diigo for highlighting words, highlighting concepts, highlighting organization, and then embedding comments. It's free. I used it a lot when I was teaching online, and now I still use it when I'm face-to-face with my students. And then we'll also talk about having students create their own worksheets, 4 different ways to save you some time and still make something that's valuable and applicable. I'm going to talk about a little bit and show you examples of using those worksheets to create tests. And by the way, what that means is that worksheets that the students have created are the study guides for the test. So you don't have to create a study guide either. I'll talk about a system that I use to have students collect vocabulary during the week so that I don't have to keep track of that. I'll talk about using Flippity.net, which is also free, to create some fun online exercises. I'll talk about a fun way to set up some easy discussion related to readings that you've done. I'll share an exercise for paraphrasing, and then a couple of quick ways to alter a text to turn the text into a worksheet. The first one is using Vito, and very quickly set it up. It's free. You create a teacher account. You can use it with any website or any PDF file. You can create groups, or you can just give students a bit.ly address, which Diigo will generate for you. So the students don't need to register for anything. Vito is most famous for being a way to access your bookmarks, no matter which computer you're on, but they also allow you to color code the text. And that's the part that I'm interested in, and I'm going to show you. I use color coding to mark words or to ask questions. And then in small groups, the students can read that and divide up who's going to teach what for other students the next day. There are advantages of doing it page by page, where I'm responsible for 3 pages, you're responsible for 3 pages, and I'll teach you everything that's color coded on that page. Students are responsible for teaching each other, and I usually save the grammar and organization points for me to teach to the entire class. I'll give you some examples. So here is what the bit.ly looks like, and if I click on it, you'll see it's going to open in Diigo. It's opening the NGO handbook, and you can see that it's color-coded. These are my color codings on chapter 3 of the NGO handbook. So my students know that if it's blue, that means it's an expression. So blue will always be 2 or more words, because I want them to learn regardless of. Not just the word regardless, I want them to see that it's a very common expression to say regardless of. And if we scroll down, here's another one: step into a leadership role, mutually reinforcing. These are words that often come together. The yellow are words that I want the students to focus on the meaning. What does ease mean? What does spur mean? What does cultivate mean? What does founders mean? What does simplify mean? The green are words that I want them to focus on for pronunciation purposes. And so they already know by the time we get to chapter 3 that the word address and address are different because one's a noun and one's a verb. So I don't have to put any little highlighted comment here. I just highlight the word and they know, oh, it's green. That means that I need to research the pronunciation of this word and be ready to teach it to the other people in my group when I meet with them on the next class meeting. So they're going to teach people that it's address, confidence to address their own needs. And this one is also green, so it's advocate. Now, one of the things you'll notice is there are little added comments, some of them. So if you hover over the comment, you can see my note. Regardless of means it doesn't matter whether the thing exists or not. Ease. So I'm just pointing out to them that ease is the verb form of easy. And spur I want to point out to them that a spur can be a noun. It's a sharp point in a cowboy boot. And when it's a verb, it means to motivate or push. So I can leave this here, or I could not have this here and have the students do the research on what does spur mean by going to the dictionary. You'll also see some here with advocate. I'm giving them the reminder that when it's a verb, it's advocate, and the pronunciation is ate. But when it's a noun, it's advocate. Sorry, something happened here. So we have separate and separate. The pink ones are where I save for me to point out to the students. So the pink means I'm going to point out either a grammar point, an organization point, a style point. And so here you can see I highlighted the word investing, but what I'm giving the students is a job to do. Find a parallel list in the sentence and analyze the grammar pattern of that parallel list. Because we had been studying making your writing better, make it flow better with parallel lists. So the students would then, in class the next day, when I ask, we're going to say, oh yeah, it's define problems, identify solutions, establish action plans. So it's verb object, verb object, verb object. Here we have another one, affected by. So I'm pointing out to the students that means people who are affected by. Sometimes I'm giving them a little grammar help. Founders, ask them a question. What's the verb form? Is it find or found? What's the difference between find and found? Because they often confuse those two. And you can see every page has links and has color coding. Sorry. When I started doing this, I had the students choose a color. Like one student would be responsible for the yellow, another student would be responsible for green, and another student would be responsible for blue. But the students and I found that it was actually better to say, okay, I'm going to do page 49 and 50, you do 51, 52, do all the colors on that page. And it ended up being a little more equal that way. And so a student who has this page is going to be responsible for all of the yellow, green, and blue on this page. And sometimes I have assigned pink to the students, but usually I save pink for me because I want to make sure I go over that with all of them. One thing to point out, students can't add their own highlights. It's not collaborative. It's just something that they see that I've done for them. So we're going to take a couple minutes in the breakout rooms. I'm going to give you a different article and ask you to talk to some partners in the breakout room and decide, in looking at this article, if you were going to highlight it in Vito, what would you mark? Maybe 5 yellow vocabulary words, 5 blue expressions or collocations, 5 words with challenging pronunciation, and if you have time, grammar or pronunciation points. For example, a verb that takes a gerund and a verb that takes an infinitive. Maybe the author used rhetorical questions. There might be some vocabulary that you can understand because there's some kind of contrast or scale involved, variations. For example, commodity and luxury is one of the words that you'll see in that text. There's a contrast between what's a commodity and what's a luxury. Might be organizational patterns that show time, contrast, problem solution, etc. So this is the link. I'm going to put the link in chat so that everybody can see it. It's about chocolate, which is one of my favorite topics. If you go into chat, everybody's got the link. So in your breakout rooms, one person could share that. You're just going to skim the article and choose who's going to, which words you would, if you were taking this for a class, which words you would use. In your breakout rooms, you should be unmiked. You should be micable. You're muted here in the main room. When we go to breakout rooms, you should be able to talk to your partners. So I'm gonna, okay. I need to go to breakout rooms. And I'm gonna create, Melissa, how many people do we have?
Sorry, there are 9, I think. Or,
okay. I'm going to do 2 breakout rooms. You'll have 3 or 4 people in a room. Look for vocabulary and collocations or pronunciation that you would like to highlight. And then when we come back together, you're going to tell me and we're going to highlight together.
We have 6.
Okay. So here we go. I'm going to give you 4 minutes, maybe 3.
So Amaha, if you'll, do you want to join the breakout room? She got a little message to ask you to break out. Oh, and Rebecca, let me go ahead and put you in a room. There you go.
They can't share the screen. It says the host disabled that function. So they won't be able to look at it together, but they should still be able to talk together.
Do you want me to go ahead and make multiple participants can share simultaneously?
Can share what? Yes, sure.
Okay,
Maybe that will help.
maybe that will. Yeah, let's see what
I'm
happens.
gonna go check.
Okay.
Could be more specific than that.
Hey, Melissa.
Hi, are you guys able to share your screen?
The other group was able to.
Okay.
We are able to, but am I a co-host? Yeah, so I'm a
Yeah.
normal participant. I am.
Oh, but
Can you remind us? So we're supposed to look for collocations, any specific kind of collocations?
Any collocations or just any vocabulary words that you think the students should focus on the definitions of,
Okay.
or words for pronunciation. So it's basically
all a host.
is everybody doing okay? Questions?
I think we're okay. We're looking for what we should choose.
Okay, very good.
Maha, are you there? Can you join a breakout room? Maha, I sent you a
Yeah, and when we first broke out, I encouraged her, but
okay. I'm gonna go to the other room for a minute. I'm gonna close the breakout rooms and give people 1 minute. Is everybody back?
We're back.
I can't tell. Everybody's back? Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. Here's the text in Diigo. It's really easy to open it up in Diigo. You have to have a little Diigo extension. You open up the text that you want, you click Diigo annotate, and now we're ready to annotate. So here we have the beginning of the text. I don't know if anybody looked up here. I would probably put make running out of a blue, because that's a phrasal verb expression, to run out of something. If you wanted, you could also tweak some kind of grammar here. If we don't, we will be. Is there anything down here that you would mark with yellow, for example? Any vocabulary words?
I chose the word imminent
Okay.
further down.
Sorry, I don't see it. Oh, here it is, imminent. Right, so we can make imminent yellow.
Right. And point out the British language versus American with the pound
Right.
symbol and ton.
Right. I think the first case was here. So that one, maybe I would make it yellow, but I could also add a little thing here that would say American English ton, British English,
Mhm.
and then save. So now this one is just marked. Students have to look up the meaning. This one is marked, but I'm giving them some information about it. We could mark effects here and ask students to, pay attention to the difference between effect and affect with the A sound. A host of, it would be another good expression that students would need to know. It means a variety of, or it means many. Anything in paragraph 2? I heard some people talking about verb tenses. We could do has been cultivated, and if you want to keep for grammar, you'd do has been cultivated and turned and whoops had.
Mhm.
Something else with my more advanced level students, I might mark something like this and say these two words,
Okay.
noun
In
or
the
verb.
first, in the first paragraph, so if we're looking at these things, we can go back and select what was that, have gone up?
Right, have gone up,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Could be another, if we're focusing on verb tenses, have gone up, right? And we have is becoming, so we have a variety of, of course, you could make it simple. You could say, just find the simple past verbs and don't worry about the others if you have a lower level class.
And you know, something else we would point out while we're saying more and more, you know, just using that phrase more and more, when it's appropriate to use that. You know?
We can put it all together, right? Is becoming more and more adjectives. Right. The reason that I marked this one is early evidence of use traces to. Students might think use is the verb or trace is the noun. So they have to see both of these words could be nouns, both of them could be verbs, but what is it in this context? Another thing you can do is pronoun reference. Many of them, what's them? Is it the cocoa salads? No. Is it the beverages? No, it's the people. So, you know, it's a good reading skill to be able to see what is them and what's their lives. There's also some humor here. If you have a more advanced level group, chocolate had a very significant role in their lives, as is the case now with many people. It's a kind of humor, right? To point out that, you know, it's a very important part of many of our lives, even today. Anything else you want to comment on? The things I might add would be took the world by storm. I would mark that with blue. Here's the one I wanted to mark. We have the word commodity. It might become a luxury. So I would teach my students look for contrast that might help you understand that a commodity is different from a luxury. A commodity, an everyday delight. A luxury, that's a kind of scale, right? You go from something very basic and boring, a commodity, to something everyday, special, but something you have every day, to something that you can't have every day because it's a luxury. So those three words are scalable versions of how available something is. Another thing I noticed is that, I often point this out with my advanced level students, here we have, the writer has expressed it in their own words, and then follow that up with a quote from an expert. So it looks like the expert is supporting what you just said. It might become a luxury. We know that in real life, maybe you read the quote first. You, the writer, the student, read the quote first, but then you report to the reader as if you are the knowledgeable one and you're using that support to back you up. There's a kind of little fake thing that we all pretend to do when we put together research papers. I don't want to spend too much time on this because we have so many other things to look at. So I'm going to go back to my notes. Here's a little interesting information about reciprocal teaching. When I have my students teach each other about the yellow, the green, the blue, reciprocal teaching shows having the students do all of the work for certain pages was more effective than having the students just focus on only pronunciation or only collocations or only definitions. I'll leave that and you can look at it again later. So student created worksheets for a second thing that I was going to talk about today. And I'm going to give you 4 different examples. Oh my gosh, we're already at 11:41. One thing you can do is have students bring in 5 comprehension questions and 3 opinion questions for a partner. So here's an example. The student writes the 5 comprehension questions here. The partner will answer them in a Google Doc. And here are 3 opinion questions the student wrote, and then the partner is going to answer those. A second way you could do it, you could have all the students bring in questions and then have the students choose their best questions. If I click here, here's an example where group 1 chose their best 3 comprehension questions and group 2 answered them. Group 2 chose their best comprehension questions and group 3 answered them. And the same thing here, group 2, group 3, group 3, group 1. And then this can become a study guide because I will use this information to create my test. Option 3, you can show the students that they can turn the subtitles and selected topic sentences into questions. So here's an example of how I did that. So I told students, this took a little bit of time, but these are the subtitles. Define your community, cultivate new leaders, look for your natural leaders, start by being involved. Then I gave the students the prompt to turn that into a question. How can you define your community? Or why is it important to cultivate new leaders? Or what are your community's natural leaders? Or why should you get your community members involved? And then the students answer those questions while they're reading. So they're creating their own questions, answering their own questions. And then they turn it into me and I give them 10 points. By the way, you can create a document and then force the students to copy that document. So this is what I just showed you, but I would give students this link. You see how it's exactly the same, except down here, I changed it to copy. And when I do that, the students are forced to make their own copy of the document. So I can make a worksheet in a Google Doc, and then each student clicks and makes their own copy of it. So then they can put their own answers in. Here, I didn't have to do that because the students were sharing one document. But down here, for this kind, I would have to have the students each make their own. A fourth way to do it is here. You can have students anticipate the questions that they might have. This was from the NGO handbook. It was the chapter on board of directors. So together in class, I asked students to come up with what are some questions that you think might be answered in the text about what a board of directors does. On the left side here, you see the student questions. What are the qualifications for being on the board of directors? What are the members' responsibilities? How do they make decisions? How can they make better decisions? And then while the students read, they had to find the answers to those questions. Notice, and I remind students of this, or I caution them, there might not be an answer to the question. And that's okay. I want them to write something on the right-hand side, even if what they write is just, this question was not answered in the text, or this question was not directly answered in the text, but I can deduce that it might be, and then they could give a possible answer. And then I can use the student answers on the worksheet to create tests. Here's an example where I put together matching questions. Strategic planning is, project planning is, evaluation is, and then the students have to match with the answers on the right. You can do a multiple choice question. What does SWOT stand for? A fill in the blank. With participatory management, it is important to create a formal blank where the staff can blank. I gave them 3 choices here. Vocabulary, I ask the students every week, one student every week or a pair of students every week, depending on how many students I have. Here's an example from Unit 3. If we click and open this, students Alexandra and Saeed were responsible for collecting vocabulary words for the whole class to look at. So I set up word, part of speech, definition, and then give a context. So these are the words they chose: be exempt from, impaired, esteem, entangle. I made half of it gray and half of it white. Students would know that Alexandra should do the white and Saeed should do the gray, and so they don't duplicate each other. From that, I created a Quizlet. Notice that definitions that the students gave are different from definitions that I would give, because I don't want it to just be memorizing. I want them to really understand the definition. So here's an example of what it would look like in Quizlet. What I would show the students would be the test. And so the students would find true, false questions. Does broaden mean physical illness and pain? False. Does outset mean the start or beginning of something? Yes. But these are not exactly the definitions that the students use. These are my own definitions because I want the students to have to think about whether they really do match or not, and not just remember what the words were. I don't want it to be an empty label. And by the way, if you have students collect vocabulary, I let students collect vocabulary from anything that came up in class, from the NGO handbook, or from our writing textbook, or from class discussions, or something that I brought up that was just a fun activity for a few minutes. But if you want to be able to use the list and the matching quiz later, you can have students tell you, mark with an asterisk, which words came from our textbook, because those are the ones that you would want to then maybe keep for the future. Flippity manipulatives are fun, and I'm going to go ahead and show you this, and I'm going to put it also in the chat. It's very easy to create these, and it allows students to, I'm going to change the text to everyone in the meeting. I'm going to put it in here. You can play with this for a minute if you like. This is how it would work. I'm going to click on this and open up. You should be able to see it. These are some vocabulary words. And so what I've done is I tell students to put adjective, verb, and noun at the top. And then the students can go ahead and move these words like blur. We saw it as a verb. Esteem is a noun. Is everybody with me? Can you see what I'm doing? Deviate.
Nancy, can I just ask, how does that work if you have a word that could be two different parts of speech? Would you have it on the
students
board
will bring
twice?
that up. The
Right.
students will bring that up, and so I might put a word like blur. We'll put it between,
Right.
right? That did come up with students, and I'd say if you think it could be both a verb and a noun, put it in between, and we'll talk about it.
Right.
Right. So stand for, ailment. These are words that came up in class. This is kind of silly and little, but down here on the right, there are settings, and you can change it to a different background, like this one. You to make it more fun. You can also use this not for parts of speech. Instead, you could do like stress on the first syllable, stress on the second syllable, stress on the third syllable. And then the students would organize it in terms of pronunciation. It's really quick and easy to do that. In fact, I'm going to jump and do that. You go to flippity.net. I want to show you how easy it is to use this. I go to flippity.net. The one that I like here is the manipulatives. You just go to instructions. I'm going to erase this. Remember some of the words that we had in the chocolate? There was chocolate, there was ton, there was cultivate, commodity, luxury. These were some of the words that we saw, right? Shortage was another one. So you just type words in there, generate, and now you have it. But I would go back actually and add noun, verb, and adjective. And then when I click generate, now it's ready to use. Really easy. There is one important thing though. You have to save this link because Flip doesn't save it for you. Because you don't have to register, they also don't save anything for you because they don't know who you are. So you need to bookmark all of your Flippity links or put them in a Google Doc so that you can come back and find them later because you won't be able to find them at the flippity.net website. Okay, because we're running out of time, other things you can do, you can pull out some statements from a text. I had this is a college freshman class. We were reading about sexiles, people who are sexiled from their room because the partner wants to have sex. And so we were discussing, should there be a university policy about this? And the students have to write a policy paper. But I pulled from the text some statements from different students. One student said, people aren't always considerate. And the same student also said, roommates also aren't assertive enough. And my first one was, we don't need a university policy. Students should work these problems out directly. So students can circle on this Likert scale 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1, what they agree with. But to make it even more fun, you can have the students stand in the corner of the room that reflects whether they circled a 5 or a 3 or a 1. And everybody who's standing under the number 5, I usually use Post-it notes, have 2 minutes to discuss why did you choose 5? Did you choose 5 for the same reasons, or did you choose 5 for different reasons? And so it can turn into a class discussion. It also prepares them for the writing, because now they've heard the different points of view in the classroom, and they can anticipate objections that someone else might come up with. Another fun one is you can write 2 statements at opposite end of the board. For example, people aren't always considerate, or people are always considerate. And then you would have students write their initials along the continuum on the board where they are in terms of how much they agree with the one statement versus how much they agree with the other statement. And then they have to defend their choice or explain their choice. Notice that you should probably let all students speak before the other students have a second chance to add something. I have also had students run to the board and move what they wrote because they've changed their minds after listening to other students, and that's okay too.
This sounds like something good to come back and expand on later and make it into a classroom debate.
Yeah. Right. I added some things that I did with my students this week because things kept coming up. I would say, oh, I should add that to my Saturday presentation. You can have students practice paraphrasing. You give them a sentence, and then you give them the beginning of how they would paraphrase it. So we stop for lunch, or what about, and then they have to finish it. Or because of the fog, the plane couldn't take off, and then they have to start with the fog. This is a completed one. The students finished this. Different ways to paraphrase the original statement. So I would give them although, and then I would give them the full sentence, although if you didn't have qualifications down and got the job, and then I would give them the sentence stem or prompt, despite. And then they have to write another sentence using despite, but keeping the same meaning. Changing from I'd prefer to I'd rather. Or changing from bananas can't to the climate is. And we're almost done. Something else you can do, you can just remove the unknown words. So let's do just this one. Here we have, chances are you have already interacted with a large language model if you've used an application that includes the autocomplete feature, simply prompting you with the word attend after you type the word, sadly, I won't be able to. Autocomplete is only the most blank expression of what software is capable of. So can you guess what might fit in this blank?
Basic, I don't know.
Be basic, exactly, right. It's only the most basic expression of what software is capable of. So next page, the answer was rudimentary. What does rudimentary mean? It means basic. If you take out the difficult words, students can often use the context to put in, not the original word, but a word that has that same context, same meaning. Let's do one more. The ultimate commercial potential is enormous. If the existing blank continues, software could revolutionize how we search for information. So what could go here?
Experiments,
Experiments. I'm thinking trend.
I would say trends.
research,
Right. And if you jump down, the original was trajectory. What does trajectory mean? It means trend. So you don't have to be as complex as this. You can just give students a whole, I'm going to jump down a little bit. Just give students a whole bunch of text. If we can get there, here we go. Here. Guess the missing words, right? So you have all of this, guess the missing words, and then students can jump to the original and find what the word was. And in many cases, the word that they guessed is a synonym of the missing word, which shows them that when you see a word like rudimentary or trajectory, don't panic. You can probably use the context to figure out what that word is. Last two things I have today, is it still 11:56? We're almost there. You can alter the text to give students some choices. For example, I had something just the other day with my students, how to write an email with military precision, and it had a lot of good details on how to write an email. But I noticed that this first summary was full of possessive S and plural S. So I turned it into an exercise. So in all of these cases, I changed it to an exercise where students have to choose it's or its, emails or emails, purposes or purposes. And then when we went over it in class, I just said, is it A or B? And the students would tell me, well, in this case, it's A. We already did it in class, so that's why it's already bolded, because I bolded it when we went over it in class and marked for them. Here it's A, B, 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 B. That was a super easy way to do a little review. If you see that the text has a certain feature that you can exploit, then the plural versus possessive. And the last example, active or passive, you can take a text and take out a lot of the verbs that are active or passive. That's what I did with this one. This is a stat at Georgetown, Jan Karski. And so I took out a lot of the verbs and made them just capital letters, and the students have to decide where or was born, molded or was molded, credited or was credited, risked or was risked. All of them are simple past, passive, or just simple past, active. And I explained that at the top.
Wow.
It's an easy way to turn something into a grammar exercise. And then we always do this exercise before we go and visit the statue. Learn something about who this man was and why is he sitting there playing chess? What's so special about him? I'm going to skip that one for now. On the next page, you will see some of the useful links. This is the document that I've been using, and I'm going to put that in the chat right now. And then here's the link for Diigo, here's the link for Quizlet, here's the link for Flippity. And if you want to use Google Docs, make sure that you set it up so that the students can open it. It has to be available and that they can be editors. And if you want them to make a copy of it, remember to just change edit to copy. Somebody asked a question, how did you create this doc without autocorrect appearing? Kathleen, which one was that? Were you asking about a Google Doc?
I think it was one you were just running through where you were doing the, that one, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it does show, right? It does show that or maybe I made that red. Yeah, it is showing the incorrect with the red purposes with the red under it. So sometimes it knows keywords would be incorrect in that context, reports would be incorrect in that context. I'm trying to remember if the students could see that at the time. I don't remember. It is 12 o'clock now.
Yeah.
I'm happy to stay and ask questions. And I'm really sorry that we.
So we had planned to be finished at noon, but I thought if we can go 5 more minutes if you have questions. I think if Nancy's happy to stay another couple of minutes and answer any of your questions. So please.
And just to remind everybody, the reason we got started late is that all of you were given an old link and we were in the new link. And so then we had to go find the old link.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Madeline?
Yeah, I was wondering how much time for a typical hour class, how much time do you spend in preparation by setting up these documents for students?
Well, the NGO handbook, I use it every semester. So once it's done, it's done. And so it's a little bit mindless. You know, I sit at home on the weekend and maybe I'm watching TV and I click and make some of the words yellow and blue and green as we go. And I've refined it as the semesters go along. So I've added more. A lot of the worksheets just take me 5 or 10 minutes to put together.
So it's
Sometimes
not that
we create
much.
the worksheet in class together, like the one about the board of directors where the students had to come up with 10 questions. I have 10 students, so each one had to come up with a unique question about what they might find in that board of directors chapter. I created that in class with them. So for the next day. So it didn't take any of my planning time to do that. We did that together. And the same thing with the turning all of the subtitles into questions. You could do that in class with them because it's a good reading skill, something they could do on their
Yeah.
own, even when they're not in an ESL class. If you have a textbook reading, turn all of the subtitles into questions, and then you're reading with a purpose, looking for the answers to those questions. So some of the planning can be done in class with the students. And the collected vocabulary, the students do that outside of class. When I turn it into a Quizlet, that takes me about 5 minutes. I don't look at their definitions. I just look at their words and make my own definitions. Oh, and by the way, Quizlet will suggest definitions if that word has appeared in any other teacher's list. So sometimes I just click and take their an already existing definition, or I simplify an existing definition. But I'm all about keeping things easy and quick.
Thanks. I think we all are.
I do spend a lot of time grading and responding to students' writing. So it's not that I don't spend time outside of class on class, but I try not to spend it on lesson planning. More on feedback.
Other questions? We have time for another question or two. I will say that I learned about Flippity in one of your previous webinars, Nancy, and really liked using it, and my students liked it too. It's really useful. So yeah, thanks for that one. If you haven't tried Flippity, I would highly recommend it.
Right, and there's lots of other Flippity options. You can make a roulette wheel of your student names, or you can make a roulette wheel of the vocabulary for the week, and then turn the wheel to see what's the next word that you have to define. We make a game out of it. You can make sure that you, if you want it, open up the link from chat before you go today, because you can then have a link to my Google Doc that has all of those examples that you saw, and a couple of things that I skipped over are also in there. You won't be able to get to it once we close the Zoom, but you should be able to get it now from the chat.
Thank you. It was very helpful, Nancy. Really, thanks a lot.
Good. I've been at Georgetown for 36 years and I have 4 more days. I'm retiring, so
Nancy, maybe many of us are now envious of Nancy because she's retiring in just a few days. So certainly wishing her well on her retirement. Not to forget about us and come back and do some more of these, we hope, with us.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily retiring from WATESOL, just from my day job.
All right, everyone. Well, it's 12:05. We don't want to keep you longer. We don't want to, use up your weekend, but we certainly appreciate everyone coming today. I started recording this a few minutes in, so if you can come back and watch it, of course, once it gets put, Tabitha, Ms. Kidwell will take care of that. And then, yes, hopefully you've opened that document, so now that you have it, you can refer to it. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you for coming on your Saturday.
Thank you.